My father demanded I marry and have kids before he dies, but I refused to sacrifice who I am to him. Why childhood wasn't what you'd call idyllic. While my mother did everything she could to create a stable and loving environment, the shadow of my father's influence loomed large. He was the archetypal strict dad, preaching discipline and logic at every turn. He'd often declare, "I'm a pragmatist. Everything must follow reason." But to me, his reason felt more like indifference. Whenever I saw him as a child, I couldn't help but feel anxious. He rarely praised me, choosing instead to critique my choices and passions. I'd always been drawn to art, painting, drawing, anything creative, and dreamed of becoming an artist one day. But my father scoffed at my dreams, dismissing them as frivolous. Art, he'd say, that's for lazy, unrealistic people who can't handle real life. Despite his disapproval, I kept trying to win his approval. I'd show him my latest sketches or paintings, hoping for even a glimmer of pride. Instead, he'd glance at them briefly and say something like, "The colors are decent, I guess." As I grew older, my father's presence in my life became more sporadic. After his divorce from my mother, he moved out of state with his new wife, the woman he'd been seeing behind my mother's back. I only saw him on rare occasions, and even then, the interactions were tense. He wasn't the type of parent who showed up for school plays or graduations. In fact, I could count on one hand the times we'd spent together one-on-one. Most of those moments were far from pleasant. Once, he had a medical emergency while driving, crashing the car into a building. Another time, he nearly got arrested after starting an argument with a stranger during one of our walks. These incidents weren't bonding experiences. They were cautionary tales about his volatility. Meanwhile, my mother worked tirelessly to provide for me. When she remarried, her new husband, Theo, stepped into the role my father had abandoned. He taught me to ride a bike, comforted me after heartbreaks, and celebrated my achievements, everything my father never did. Over time, Theo became my true dad in every way that mattered. 3 months ago, I made the decision to come out as bisexual. It was a personal milestone for me, but I dreaded how my father would react. My fears were justified. When I told him, his response was cruel and cutting. He called me a disappointment and accused me of indulging in some twisted fetish to please men. "You've embarrassed me," he said, his words dripping with contempt. It didn't stop there. He took to Facebook, posting homophobic memes and rants about how queer people should be reprogrammed. I couldn't take it anymore. I deleted him from my friends list and distanced myself further. His wife called me in tears, begging me to reconcile with him. "He's just old-fashioned," she insisted. But I wasn't about to excuse his behavior anymore. Last week, my father dropped another bombshell. His kidney was failing again, and he said he didn't have much time left. He wanted to know if I was seeing anyone, and I hesitated before telling him about my boyfriend. That's when he hit me with his demand. "You should marry him now. I need to walk you down the aisle before I die." I was stunned. His request wasn't about my happiness. It was about his need to fulfill some patriarchal fantasy of legacy. When I told him marriage wasn't on the table for us right now, he grew agitated. "You need to have kids," he barked. "Make me proud for once." That was the final straw. "How have I not made you proud already?" I snapped. "I've built a life I'm proud of. If that's not enough for you, that's your problem." The fallout was immediate. His wife called me the next day, hysterical. "He's devastated," she cried. "You broke his heart." She accused me of being cold and selfish, claiming I was more my mother's daughter than his. "You're right," I replied, "and I'm proud of that." But her words stayed with me. No matter how much I told myself I was doing the right thing, I couldn't shake the guilt. I confided in Theo, who reassured me. "If you're happy with your life, that's all that matters," he said. "Don't let anyone, not even your father, make you feel otherwise." Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I got a call from my stepbrother, Mark. He was sobbing. "Dad hit me," he choked out. "I don't know what to do." Hearing those words made my blood run cold. I knew my father had a temper, but I never thought he'd turn violent toward Mark. I told him to pack a bag and come to my mom's house. He arrived later that night, shaken and scared. Over the next few days, I helped Mark settle in. He started therapy, and Theo stepped in as a father figure for him, just as he had for me. Watching Mark heal was bittersweet. It reminded me of my own journey, but it also made me realize how deeply my father's behavior had scarred us both. The situation escalated when my father's wife showed up at my workplace, furious. She accused me of turning Mark against their family. When I tried to explain, she slapped me across the face. My coworkers intervened, and she was escorted out by security. That night, I filed a restraining order. It was a painful decision, but I knew it was the right one. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I threw myself into work, therapy, and art, using creativity as a way to process my emotions. My father continued to send messages, but I ignored them. I couldn't let him drag me back into his toxic cycle. Theo's unwavering support kept me grounded. "You've built a beautiful life," he said one evening. "Don't let him take that from you." I don't know if I'll ever reconcile with my father. Maybe one day, he'll see me for who I am and not who he wants me to be. Until then, I'm choosing to focus on the people who lift me up, my mom, Theo, and the family I've built for myself. For the first time, I feel free.